Good afternoon. Welcome to the March 7th Regional Planning Committee meeting. Before I move forward, I'd like to ask our interpreter how to access interpretation.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio. Do not hear original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer el uso del servicio de interpretación, favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil del Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio. Silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares en la recepción en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I will ask our clerk, Ms. Francesca Webb, to confirm that we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum. Today, East County and the County of San Diego are absent.
Thank you. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region has historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, the Lucene, the Capuchino, and the Cahuilla. Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. I will now call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Since this is our first meeting of the year, I would like each member to introduce themselves. I'll start. I am Coronado Mayor Pro Tem Carrie Downey, and I am just rejoining the SANDAG board and now the Planning Committee, but I have been on the SANDAG board since I was first elected back in 2004. So it is wonderful to be back, and I look forward to working with all of you. I will go to my, well, nope, he's busy. We'll go to my left.
Yeah, Bruce Ehlers. I'm the mayor in the city of Encinitas and new to this, so lots of reading. Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia Dillard, Vice Mayor for the City of La Mesa.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Ron Neering. I'm the chairman of the Cresta Hisa Harbors and Canyon Granite Hills Community Planning Group. Try to say that 10 times fast. And I'm here on behalf of the Association of Planning Groups. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melina Pereira. I am the Acting Deputy District Director of the Planning and Local Assistance Division at Caltrans, and I'm sitting in for Ann Fox, our District Director.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Nishihira, Assistant Vice President of Planning at the Port of San Diego, and I'm sitting in today for Commissioner Frank Gertassen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dita Siamani, City of National City, representing the San Diego County Water Authority today.
Rebecca Jones, Mayor of San Marcos, North County Inland is who I'm representing today. Thanks.
Hi, Kent Lee, Council President Pro Tem for the City of San Diego.
Thank you so much. All right, on to item number 1, non-agenda public and member comments. Per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. Francesca, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. We do have 3 public comments on this item. First will be Purita Javier, followed by Cesar Javier.
Good afternoon. We need help to abate a home-based business, home occupation and ceramics, manufacturing and kiln operation located at 52 38 Streamview Drive, District 9, City of San Diego since 1984. The home-based kiln operation has been a potential harm to human and environment, as vulnerable residents in every close proximity to the kiln operation, our medical symptoms, differently breathing, dizziness, unusual headaches, heart palpitation, anxiety, fear, and depression. We were hospitalized related to the toxic fumes from the kiln operation. On June 13, 2021, when the homeowner of kiln operation converted the furnace kiln from wood fuel to gas, the fumes we were inhaling were worse and more potent. We sought help from the police, and their advice was to build a wall and close our windows. We talked to the kiln homeowners.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Next will be Cesar Javier, followed by Truth.
Cesar Javier, victim of toxicity, along with my wife. And I would like to show this to our land use chair, Mr. Kent Lee, my fellow citizen and consistent classmates of ours in all city meetings since 2021. And this is the solution. Aspirin, palliative. Is this how my government, the city of San Diego, they are supposed to be exercising the utmost effective leadership? Councilor Lacaba, the chair of Environmental Committee, the mayor, oh my God, he must be in Hollywood with Big Caesar and robust ribbons, because that is his or her duty. It's not about governance. We wanted leadership, a problem solver. Will this solve the issue, ma'am, chair from Coronado, the flag general of the naval force? We expect a military kind of leadership that it must be solved now. Something like that. That's a metaphor, Mom. My point here is all about assigned leadership. Leadership that knows how to make decisions day by day. Leadership that is good in social judgment day by day equals effective leadership. Councilor Lee, wake up, please.
Time has expired. Our next speaker will be Truth. And Truth will be our final speaker on this item.
All right, this is now the second SANDAG committee in which I'm going to officially blame Laura Koval for my appearance, and yet she no-showed me. But it worked out well the first time because I actually learned a lot of the Borders Committee and was able to be a constant friendly reminder for them to get on the American track. I don't know what I'm going to be for you guys. But I want to point out no-show union burrito eating Tara, the terror loss of reason, is absent again. But even without her lifeless presence, there's still many women running this show. That means this could be the best show, but also that SANDAG continues to have a woman bias. And maybe in this temporary femme-phobic era, we need that balance, especially right before some celebrate the communist-derived holiday known as International Women's Day. I remain on the American page where Women's Day is actually every day because no other country ran by socialists or communists ever protected the creator-endowed rights of women like this country did. But I'm concerned with my past support of Carrie in this role due to her comments at a past council meeting where she suggested that Zoom comments and people sharing their views is a problem. That violates SANDAG's alleged commitment to equity for equitable access to meetings, which was also violated at the February 21st joint meeting fiasco. So I will be monitoring how these meetings are run. Next, the airport transit connection was covered better here than any time at the board of directors meetings. Why? Regional Planning's Jennifer Williamson said you want to pare down options to 2 or 3 in order to save money on the environmental impact report. Well, then what the heck went down with the Lausanne project to waste money studying options that involve dangerous tunneling and eminent domain? Jennifer also said that the ATC could be an Old Town or Santa Fe depot. When was that decided and by who? The ATC also requires separation of data on the needs of different areas. That's Central San Diego, North County, East County, and South Bay, or it's all another SANDAG charade. And charette's a new word for me. And just for my personal public record, I wrote a song earlier inspired by punk songs about hometowns, which is something I don't actually have myself because I didn't grow up in a hometown. But sorry, I'm not going to read it for you guys. I need like 20 minutes to do that maybe, or maybe 5. Maybe if you want to do a deal. Just kidding.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Antoinette, are there any updates you'd like to share?
I have a few, thank you. Mario is in Mexico meeting with the government about Otay Mesa East and environmental mitigation and the grant that we got to develop the environmental border master plan. So you're stuck with me today. We just actually were in Sacramento with the board chair. We met with the governor's office. We met with FHWA, and we attended the CalCog, California Council of Governments board meeting and meetings. CalCog, for those of you who are not familiar with them, is an association of regional agencies like SANDAG across the state. And 2 important topics that this group will be taking up that were really the focus of many of those meetings were RENA reform and SB 375 reform. So I think those are both items that we'll be having a lot of discussions about this year and beyond. We're also getting ready to bring the budget to the executive committee and the board, the draft FY26 budget, and a big focus has really been evaluating every single project, being very smart and efficient with the resources that we have, and realistic on what we can do with those resources. So we're going to be working with Chair Huebner to have several discussions with the board over the next coming months about how we want to prioritize our resources and allocate our resources. I also wanted to share, you're the first group to hear that CARB officially informed us that the amended 2021 regional plan was approved. 2 years after we submitted the amendment, but we do have it approved now. So that is our new regional plan, and that's very good news. And I think many of you attended the joint Policy Advisory Committee meeting that we have, so you know that we're getting ready to release now the 2025 plan. For public comment in May, we'll be offering one-on-one briefings, and we're going to be bringing that same presentation to the board for discussion and input. Senator Adam Schiff came to visit San Diego last weekend. He toured the Low Sand Corridor and the Del Mar Bluffs, and a lot of good conversations about the critical importance of that rail connection for not only our region, but the nation. Last Friday, the board actually advanced 4 proposed realignments to go into environmental study. And related to the Low Sand Corridor, there's an absolute work window this weekend, beginning tomorrow, March 8th through Sunday, March 9th. So that's a full closure of the rail line from Oceanside to downtown San Diego. And this will allow for construction to continue on Del Mar Bluffs 5 and the Bataguitos Lagoon double track project. And obviously we are moving, and we've been hoping that we would be moved in by the middle of the month, but that schedule is getting pushed out just a little bit. Looked like we are going to be moving in staff the first week of April, so it is likely that your very last meeting here will be March 28th, and you'll be in the new space. But we'll provide plenty of communications to you so that you know when we've officially moved and where you will be meeting. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any of the members have comments or questions? I'll go to my right first. No. No. And on this side of the dais? No. Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to recommend the consent agenda?
Move approval, Chair.
Thank you. And do I have, it should be noted that a member's absence from the meeting for which minutes are being approved does not prevent the member from participating in their correction or approval. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Chair, so sorry. We do have some public comment on the consent calendar. If we could take those before the vote.
Okay, all right, hold on a second. All right.
Thank you so much. First will be Cesar Javier, followed by Truth.
Cesar Javier. I would like also to mention that I am a Filipino-American by choice. And I have lived here for 24 years and very thankful to Uncle Sam. I was able to send my 3 daughters to school, a pharmacy and 2 nurses. This is now my payback. And we consistently attend this meeting because this is a cream of thinkers. And we will learn from here, and we will teach from here in that motion. We are expectant, very high expectation, because we have Councilor Rivera out, we have Mayor Gloria out, and we have Councilor Lacaba supposed to be out, and now we have a representation from the city, Mr. Kent Lee. You should be out now. Why? The minutes tells that they have neglected the Tijuana River pollution issue. Thank you. Land, air, water are represented here. You are the judge. That was since 1993. And Air Pollution Control District, where Mr. Rivera and the mayor are members of the governing body, and they did nothing but smile like Mona Lisa. Why? We found out that the Air Pollution Control District is not about attaining air quality for all. No, they are after money, 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 because the director is only after permit. When we say permit, that's money. And the governing board only to do is discretionary, oh, that rule is okay. And last meeting, you know what? The stakeholder were there, oh, thank you, Air Pollution Control Districts, because we have 50,000 workers because of the approval of manufacturing work, which are spewing toxic gases.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Truth.
Very, very enthralling minutes. Item 2, I appreciate that Caltrans's Karen Jewell showed up to this meeting only. That's what it says. But the minutes say there was a meeting scheduled for November 22nd, 2024, but there's no video of that meeting. And there was a BOD and a Borders meeting that day. I was at both, and I saw no regional planning meeting occur. Item 3, that transit extension ordinance and expenditure plan is still not being followed when it comes to SANDAG's $1 million mile plus bike lanes. That slime, green paint, and dangerous curb stops are very expensive. I watched the last City of Santee Council meeting, and I heard nothing about an unforeseen technical document of a water supply assessment and other bureaucratic activities. But I do remember something about Gillespie and somebody saying ACLU instead of ALCU. Big difference. But if the Santee-specific plan is expected to be completed by May 11th, maybe I'll try to be there to give them some comments. Maybe call Laura out for no showing. And as far as the grant to El Cajon, the slime green paint sure is ugly. And guess what? Nobody uses it. And the future bike lanes on Main Street will also be the last thing Main Street needs or will actually use during the 100-degree summer months. Improvements to transit stations where, when I compare the blue line to the orange or green line trolley stations, it's an absolute disgrace and inequity personified. The safe, rich areas served by the northern half of the blue line have emergency buttons and great lighting, but not only do they not need it, but it exists nowhere else. El Cajon Transit Station doesn't even have proper lighting for safety, misplaced priorities. But nobody's going to become transit oriented when they have children and need groceries. For crosswalk pedestrian improvements, we need lights on the ground at night or glow in the dark crosswalk paint. No more turning on red and more beacon lights in high pedestrian areas. You guys got to start thinking outside the box instead of the stupid smart city and what's that other one called? I can't remember, from DOT. I don't know. I can't remember, but it's basically where they put all the stupid bulb out curbs and stuff, something that doesn't actually help people. But I want to say thanks for the performance measures report detailing projects and spending.
That concludes the public items on consent. I'm sorry, the public comments on consent.
Okay. Does anybody now have any comments from the dais before we call for the vote? No? Okay, please vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you all. Okay. Okay, moving on to reports. First report I have is Susan Freeman. I didn't see, oh, she is here. Susan Freeman, Samaya Elder, and Natasha Dulick will present on the development of a long-term roadmap for climate action in the region and seek feedback on draft greenhouse gas reduction measures from committee members. Welcome. Nice to see you again, Susan.
Great to see you again too, Chair. And thank you for having us, committee members. My name again is Susan Friedman. I'm the Climate Planning Manager in the Planning Department here at SANDAG, since we've got some new faces. And I'm here with members of my team, Samaya Elder and Natasha Dulick. And we're going to walk through what we're working on with many of your local government staff on regional climate action planning. This is through a U.S. EPA grant that was given to most of the states in the country, as well as about 85 metro regions. And it was really to set out regional and statewide climate visions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that build on local efforts, but try to see where could we be most effective regionally or statewide with programs and policies. Some other elements with this, which I am forgetting for a second, I just want to say we're coming here now for your feedback because we've been to several of the working groups here at SANDAG, including Sustainable Communities and the Social Equity Working Group, as well as the Tribal Transportation Working Group. And we've been holding meetings, interagency meetings again with local staff and getting a lot of details. So now's the time before we turn this over to our partner, the University of San Diego's Energy Policy Initiative Center, who will be quantifying GHG reductions for us. We really want to see, are there things we're missing, things that you think are important that maybe aren't captured in the attachment, so that we can incorporate that before we hand that over for the next step. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Samaya, and she's going to walk through the project.
Thank you so much, Susan. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move on to our agenda today, which will begin with an update and overview of the EPA grant that is supporting this work. We'll then dive into the Regional Climate Action Roadmap, which is really the focus of today and which will house the measures that we'll be walking through in the following steps. And then Natasha will close us out with some next steps. So to provide some background on this Regional Climate Action Roadmap, it started back in September of 2023 when SANDAG was awarded a planning grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, to develop these 3 reports. So right now, we're currently working on the Regional Climate Action Roadmap, which builds on the Priority Climate Action Plan, or PCAP, which you may recall us working on in late 2023 and all of last year. The roadmap itself will serve as a comprehensive vision for regional collaboration around climate action. So you'll hear this a few times in our presentation today, but I really want to highlight that this means it's not just about things that SANDAG would implement. It's really about what many different types of agencies and organizations and jurisdictions throughout the region could do to come together to combat climate change long term. So the roadmap will include a couple of key elements in addition to the measures. So at the top here, the second bullet, it'll have a new regional greenhouse gas, or GHG, inventory. It'll also include greenhouse gas projections out through 2050. And then it'll also have a economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction targets, and those will be aligned with our state climate goals. And then, of course, the bulk of the plan, which is what we're here to share today, is those measures and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 7 sectors across the economy. So those are listed on the right-hand side of the screen here, and you'll hear more about those in just a minute. And then lastly, wanted to recognize that the roadmap will also be looking at things like benefits to environmental justice communities, reductions in other air pollutants that would occur if this plan and its measures were implemented, and lastly, anticipated workforce needs. So now that you've heard a little bit about the roadmap and its contents, we're going to delve into our process that we've been through to develop these measures. Susan alluded to a lot of the outreach that we've done so far, but just to reiterate, throughout the activities that are listed here, we've been working very closely with the climate and sustainability staff at all of your jurisdictions and other regional agencies and partners. So to start back with drafting our initial greenhouse gas reduction measures, we did a lot of research and reviewed existing measures from local CAPs, the County of San Diego's Regional Decarbonization Framework, our 2021 Regional Plan, and other types of related documents to kind of inform our baseline. We then held a workshop called a Climate Table Workshop back in July of 2024. That brought together local governments, public agencies, environmental groups and nonprofits, community-based organizations, tribes, others. It was really a diverse group who came together to share their ideas with us on initial greenhouse gas reduction measures and other types of climate priorities. We then spent the next several months compiling and assessing all of the information that we had gathered as part of that first push to develop our initial measures. And then in October of last year, we had meetings with technical stakeholders who helped us refine our draft greenhouse gas reduction measures. So that's that second section on the timeline here. And then finally, we developed some solid draft greenhouse gas reduction measures, which is where we are now. And we have a couple of ongoing outreach efforts that are helping us inform and continually improve these measures. So this has included interagency meetings with local governments and agencies, as we've mentioned. We also have partnerships with 3 CBOs in the region to help us gather public and community input on the measures and climate priorities. We held another climate table workshop just last month in February. We are also doing a regional public survey, which is open right now and is linked as part of the agenda packet. So if you're interested, we would love to hear your thoughts there as well. And then, of course, lots of presentations at SANDAG working groups and committees like we're doing today. So this is really to help illustrate just kind of the effort that's been put towards making sure that these measures are really well informed, and we're gathering lots of different input as part of the process. So with that process in mind, we're going to move on to our draft measures now. So I'm going to just start us off here, and then Natasha will walk through the measures for each sector covered in the roadmap, as well as some example actions that could be taken to implement each of them. So before that, I have a couple of caveats to include. We want to definitely note that the measures themselves are comprehensive, so not everything will be covered in today's presentation. We'll be going through all of our draft measures, but there is so much in the objectives and supporting actions for each of these, so we encourage you to take a look at the agenda packet, which I believe starts on page 25. I also want to acknowledge that these are, of course, still drafts. That's why we're here today. So these are not final. We're here looking for your feedback. And then just another reminder that the roadmap is a regional vision for collaborative climate action. So there are things in the measures that SANDAG would not have the authority to implement. Still, we wanted to kind of bring together all of the work that's been done in the region and see where we could expand on that, even if it's not something that SANDAG would be implementing directly. So with that, I'm going to turn it to you, Natasha.
Thanks, Samaya. All right, so I'll dive now into our 7 sectors that are in our roadmap and the accompanying measures and actions that we have in there. So starting here with transportation, these measures really include continuing and growing many of the key projects and programs that are already underway in the region. So these measures would look like increasing public transit use, expanding active transportation, expanding flexible fleet services like neighborhood electric vehicles and micromobility, reducing or continuing expanding transportation demand management programs to reduce VMT, such as van pool, increasing the adoption of zero-emission vehicles, including passenger vehicles, trucks, and buses, and then lastly, reducing fuel use from idling vehicles, so think roundabouts and curb management strategies. On this next slide, we actually have 2 sectors here, so just a note that the sectors are color-coded and they correlate to the little icons in the corner. So first, we have electricity with our 1 measure, which is to decarbonize the regional electric grid. And this would include things like increasing participation in fully renewable electricity options, and then increasing the generation of distributed renewable energy throughout the region. And then for the second sector here, buildings, we have 2 measures, which would look at increasing the electrification of buildings, and then increasing the energy efficiency of buildings for those that are already electrified. And for both of these measures, we are looking at municipal, residential, and then non-residential and commercial buildings for the projects and programs under this sector. Next up, we have another 2 sectors, so natural and working lands and waste and materials management. First, we have natural and working lands, the top 3 in green here. And these are specifically looking at conserving and preserving our existing ecosystems in the region, and with measures that would seek to capture carbon and act as sinks. So these measures include conserving marine and wetland ecosystems, conserving forest, shrublands, and chaparral ecosystems, and then increasing urban canopy cover. And then the second sector on here is our waste and materials management sector, which really look at seeking to limit waste and reduce emissions from the operations in our region. So these measures include diverting waste from landfills, so that includes organic waste and waste from construction and demolition projects, reducing landfill emissions through increased methane capture at landfills, and then lastly, to reduce emissions from water and wastewater treatment facilities here in our region. So this slide has our last 2 sectors in our roadmap, agriculture and industry. For agriculture, we have 4 on the left in orange that are looking at best practices to reduce emissions and expand or conserve our ag lands. These measures include reducing agricultural operations emissions, looking at equipment and just more efficient options overall, conserving agricultural lands, expanding urban farming in the region like community gardens, and then managing soil health to sequester carbon and improving soil management practices overall. And then lastly, our last sector is industry. We have 2 measures on the right, and just a note, like we don't have a huge industrial sector here in San Diego. It's a smaller portion of our emissions, but there are definitely still ways to reduce. So these measures would look at reducing the energy intensity of industrial facilities here, focusing on the overall energy efficiency of these facilities in our region, and then reducing climate pollutants and emissions from facilities. And I will note again that we did receive comments in this sector recently from some subject matter experts in the industry. So we're working on some tweaks here to the industry sector. So stay tuned for those in our draft measures. So that wraps up our draft measures for all 7 sectors, and now looking forward to some next steps as far as the measures and our outreach. We are going to continue to refine these draft measures and the supporting actions from the feedback that we've received through outreach events, the public survey that Samaya mentioned, and then the presentations that we've been doing to our working groups and committees like today. And then from there, we're going to work with our consultant, USD EPIC, that Susan had mentioned, to quantify the emissions reductions from the measures once we finalize them. Then we'll also work with EPIC to complete our updated regional greenhouse gas inventory and plan to have that ready by this spring. And lastly, we aim to publish our draft roadmap and host another climate table this summer, looking to come back to you all with milestone updates along the way. So that's it for our presentation. We'd love to hear your comments and feedback here today. If you ever want to reach out to us, this is our email here, but we really appreciate your time and look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you to the climate team. Francesca, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have 2 public comments. First will be Cesar Javier, followed by Truth.
Cesar Javier, respectfully, we are filling up for those 2 absentees right now, the voting absentees. We are willing because your SANDAG, my SANDAG, our SANDAG. And thank you for this honest and wise presentation. It only opens my desire personally. I have an acquaintance in civil engineering, urban planning, public administration, and education right here in San Diego. My department head, Cesar, the most important in teaching are the students. Let go the parents. Focus on your student. Now we are trying to focus on you because right now you are our student. Afterwards, you teach us because we are also students. It's a seesaw, fair and just. Now listen. In previous inputs of the public, which is supposed to be heavy in all your endeavors, ma'am, sirs, you need public inputs. You need those faculty members, the student, bright students from high school to college, graduate studies, doctoral from Harvard. We need them all. And we are only few. And the weightlifting decision only comes from few. Now, let me emphasize this. We need you need us, and please listen to everybody. One thing that I cannot surmise is that there is no lead agency on air, except Air Pollution Control Districts, which is permit agency, disorganized. We need to have a lead agency on land pollution, water pollution, ocean pollution. Never mind the voice or light pollution or noise pollution. Look, focus
Thank you.
on the
Your
four.
time has expired.
Thank
Our
you.
next speaker will be Truth, and Truth will be our final speaker on this topic.
I actually thought those are good ideas, although maybe they don't need us, they just need our tax dollars. Reduce GHGs from transportation, buildings, and energy by 2030. Does that mean SANDAG is going to reduce use of LED lights, which have been found to emit harmful levels of emissions upon people's eyes? The regional GHG inventory sounds like socialist caps on travel. What is climate outreach or climate visions? Why does page 40 refer to the disproven conspiracy theory called global warming? There's allegedly analysis of reductions in air pollutants. So what is SANDAG doing about the sewage emergency? If there's a goal to reduce emissions from industry, isn't that contradictory to the new Otay Mesa East tolled border crossing that will increase industry pollutants along the southern border? If there's a goal to reduce emissions from agriculture, is SANDAG going to keep promoting vegetarianism, as I heard at a past committee meeting, as if it's actually a good diet for most people? According to the item, no regular people were consulted about these draft measures. Why is there only a public survey at the end of the predetermined options? For increasing transit ridership, how about increasing paid ridership? That way there's actually money to fund fun ideas like restrooms, seating, lighting, shade, and Wi-Fi for transit users. and dump the ATC. If a rapid bus is good enough for low-income neighborhoods, then it's good enough for high-income airplane users. I'm in high support of improving sidewalks. Somebody tell the county and the city of San Diego. No to incentivizing programs for bikes and e-bikes. This already fell with corrupt Nathan Fletcher's Pedal Ahead program. Signal prioritization is not needed for bicyclists or pedestrians. What's needed is lighted crosswalks at night. No to using our tax dollars to incentivize inefficient electric farm equipment or increasing dangerous, expensive, fire-prone EVs. Yes to building highways to reduce idling. Deal with that one. And what happens if SANDAG cities fail these ridiculous goals? Is it the same thing as the UN having both a 2030 and a 2050 date, the assumption of failure? I say return the grant. Let's just quit. And there's an objective of increasing food recovery, SANDAG sandwiches and burritos. Need I say more on that one? You can give them away. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Do we have any member comments or questions? Yes, please, Mayor Jones.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Great job. I had a couple of comments that I'd like to make. One on transportation would be bike lanes. And I bring this up quite frequently as to the type that we are installing. The cycle tracks, I forget what class they are, but the cycle tracks, I hear often from serious cyclists that they are not entirely safe. And so, I've talked about this, that we really need to go back to just not one cycling community, but several, so that we get better feedback on that, because many times when we're installing the very expensive ones, and that's part of it too, is when we think about how much something costs, and then they're not actually effective because people would prefer to be in a Shero. Most of the cyclists that I speak to, we're spending so much money on the infrastructure. I'd rather us figure out how to have more Sheros and make those available, because I do believe that many of the cyclists actually prefer to use those. And so, and they're a better value too financially. And then talking about the zero emission vehicles, we do definitely need more infrastructure when it comes to them, because I do have an electric vehicle. I get terrible range anxiety when I forget to either plug in, or I'm going all over the county, and I could easily go 250 miles, depending on what my schedule looks like that day. There are a lot of people like me, especially when we're talking about people that are, service oriented. We're never going to get people out of their work trucks or anything like that if we only have a little bit of infrastructure, and we are trying to move them over into electric vehicles. And then on flexible fleets, microtransit. I hate to even bring this up, but it is definitely a consideration. We have pilot projects that are launched. We find that they are indeed successful, and then there's no money to continue funding them. That is a tragedy, because I believe that microtransit fits more into the lifestyle of most of our residents. I've had extremely good feedback from my community, and we need to figure out where we would get money. I call that OPM. That's grants and whatnot, other people's money, for these sorts of initiatives. And then just moving on quickly to electricity and buildings, I think that if we used efforts or further honed our efforts, it's great to have new energy efficient buildings, but many of our older buildings are not energy efficient. That's where we could actually make such a huge difference, in my opinion, to actually fund situations where we've got money when we get grants from the state to specifically help folks with windows even. I mean, that makes a huge difference. I actually, with my ex-husband, we used to own a property down at the beach. We actually went in and spent quite a bit of money on those types of efforts, because it was an older home and it was always cold. But I think we could make a real difference countywide if we were to use some of our grant funding for older buildings that are just not energy efficient. Even if we could figure out how to help people with that maybe are lower income, with even insulation. I mean, that in itself it has so many good effects. So anyway, those would be my thoughts on those items. And thank you very much for the presentation again, ladies. Appreciate it.
You want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Sure. If Bruce was looking to go first, I just wasn't sure if you were going off the queue. And so happy to turn over to Mayor Ellis to start.
Where do I see that?
I just,
I can't see it. So I apologize. There's no way to know.
yeah, I didn't know whether we're using it or not, or so. Oh, use my hand, just,
Oh.
yeah, just, okay. So I had some preliminary questions. I thought I'd start with that.
Oh, please.
In the P.
On your mic.
It is on. There we go. Just pull it closer. Yeah. I had some preliminary questions, and the first one was, and I reread or read the PCAP, and in it talked about, step one was the PCAP. Step two was the comprehensive climate action plan. Is that the regional? Is that the same thing? Okay. And back then it said it was, going to be available in July. It's now December. Is that what I saw up on the presentation?
Yes, originally that was the due date from the EPA, and then last summer they extended that deadline so it'd be consistent across all the states and regions to December 1st,
Okay, great.
2025.
And renamed it to
And we
regional.
renamed it because we got a lot of feedback that it was confusing with local climate action plans to have comprehensive climate action plans. So everybody liked roadmap since it's about a vision more so. So,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. I appreciate it. I'm just trying to get up to speed on the, terminology and whatnot. On the, when we get into the, GHG inventory, is that can somebody explain to me how the CARB agreement that we just came to, which sounds great, is that, how we measure the GHG inventory? Can you explain the relationship between the CARB agreement and where we're going to get a GHG inventory?
Sure. One thing we didn't mention was we are coordinating this effort with the 2025 Regional Plan Development and the EIR. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Inventory, which will be for the base year 2022, when it's available for this, is also what's being used for the 2025 Regional Plan. And so in the past regional plans, we've used USD's group EPIC to also quantify those regional GHG inventories. And they have a good relationship with CARB and create the methodology that we review internally as well as that gets reviewed at the state. So when we come out with this inventory, it will be able to be useful for the regional plan and EIR to demonstrate where the region's going with the forecast even out to 2050 and then ways that we can reduce those emissions. So they're related, but also two separate tracks because the regional plan has a lot of extra regulation around it that CARB has, where this is an EPA document, but we're able to take some useful tools out of it, like the inventory.
Then if they're parallel, so to speak, what is the CARB purpose? It's not the measurement mechanism used in the regional plan?
Well, the regional plan, and Antoinette might add on here, but, or do you want to just add on now? Because there's specific requirements for the regional plan that are not with EPA.
Yeah, so Councilmember Ellers, I think what you're referring to is the SB 375 and the target that we have for 19% reduction in
Yeah.
GHG that is really based on VMT reduction. So what Susan's looking at is actual GHG. What we have to measure for CARB for SB 375 and the regional plan is really VMT. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the CARB is SB 375?
Yep.
And
And that's
VMT
the
related.
regulation that we have to comply with for the
Okay,
regional
then-
plan. Yep.
Very, very good. Then that brings me to my next portion that gets to the EV discussion. And I think it was in a previous joint session that I think you made a comment about we don't get credit for the EV. Can you first of all reiterate that if we I think I'm going to indirectly quote you or paraphrase you, if we could take advantage of the EV, we would easily meet our 19% goal. Yet we can't. Can you explain that why? This does not make sense to me. Yet we have it in the goals here
Yeah.
that we're going to get more people to EV.
Yeah, so this is why I mentioned in the agency update that one of the big topics at CalCog was SB 375 reform.
That's what
right?
I wondered.
Because
Okay.
we all believe that we should be getting credit for the investments that we make in electric vehicle infrastructure and incentive programs. But the intent of SB 375 was to demonstrate how you could reduce GHG through land use and transportation integration. VMT was kind of selected as the measure to best evaluate that. So it's confusing because it says it's a GHG target. We get very little credit for fleet electrification. We used to get some credit for the incentives that we were making. The reason that the state pulled back on that is because there are so many federal and state incentives now available, and they only give credit to what they think the regions are bringing to the table, and they don't feel like we're needed as much anymore. We're pushing back on that because there's a huge need. We've done gap analysis. We know that in particular, in multifamily units, at employment sites, public charging, we're not nearly where we need to be in order to meet the state's targets for electric vehicles.
So if I understand this correctly, then the SB 375 is a 19% reduction. On top of that will be an additional EV reduction. What is the total target reduction?
It is just
I mean, in
19, it is
reality-
19%. That's what we have
Well,
to
that's the
achieve.
SB
But it's not
375,
based on- yep.
but there's presumed in that we cannot and won't count what is actually happening in the marketplace and being accepted by the marketplace. Well, there are two trends in the marketplace that I think are really what are driving the real solution, which is EVs and telecommuting. And it seems like in my climate action plan in my city, we didn't really take that into account either, as much as I think we should. And by the way, I plan to fix that. That's one of the changes I plan to bring to the city of Encinitas. But it seems like we're doing the same thing here, where people are willing to go and where the market is telling us they are going, we're ignoring. And we're telling everybody, you need to go to public transit. But all the trends I see in every survey, every serious survey, SCAG ran a great one, public transit is down and continuing down. And so I think we're putting our money in the wrong place. We're pouring money into the very infrastructure that is not being used by the market, by the people, by the voters, call it whatever you want. And we are not being allowed to take credit for the very area where they are going. So that's my point and my comment, and I will continue to make that comment. So let's see if I had any other idling at intersections. So this is a note off of EVs and the process there. We talk about, putting in roundabouts, and roundabouts are great where they're needed. You'll hear me say at my city council, if my favorite quote all time, Mark Twain, if your only tool is a hammer, everything begins to look like a nail. So, you'll hear me say, you get a roundabout, you get a roundabout. They're not the solution to everything. And so if on one hand, we're decarbonizing our transportation through electric microtransit, through electric cars, through telecommuting, then the idling issue goes away. Now, when I build a roundabout, I'm building a 50-year structure. And we're supposed to be getting rid of electric cars by 2035. In 10 years. I'm building a 50-year structure for a 10-year problem. It doesn't make sense. So now if roundabouts make sense on an intersection, absolutely put them in. But this concept of reducing idling through edicting roundabouts, the solution will get there about the time the problem goes away by itself due to EVs and other things. So that's another comment. And then one of the my last point will be about telecommuting, and I'm in the high-tech industry. Many of my employees telecommute from different countries, not just San Diego, but here too. I do too. And that seems like that has been a huge effect. I think we've all seen Friday afternoon traffic driving home from downtown or wherever is much lighter than it was 10 years ago. Right? All due to the telecommuting. And yet we have one bullet in here, and it basically says support telework throughout the region, but there's nothing about how. And to me, that's another case where the voters, the people, the market, whatever you want to call it, have all shifted to that quite willingly. And that seems to be, if we really want to save the environment and reduce greenhouse gases, let's put our money where the action is and where the people want to go, because ultimately they're the ones that vote to put me in this seat. And so I need to listen to them. So those are my three area comments. Thank you.
Back over to you, if I've got the order right.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you. Happy to comment on some of what's been provided here. Sorry, just pulling back up my notes. There are a couple of areas that I think just sort of piqued my interest in particular. One was this discussion about flexible fleets, and it really made me curious how different jurisdictions are taking different actions when it relates to areas like bike share, scooters, other microtransit options outside of personal use. Because otherwise, I think a number of measures that we're talking about as a part of this roadmap, whether it's microtransit, electrification, even building efficiency, as Mayor Jones mentioned, a lot of this really depends heavily on incentives in order to spur individual change. I know at the City of San Diego, we have still, to be very frank, struggled with scooters and bike share programs, something that I've been a bit disappointed in our ability to implement, despite being our size of city. And I think that's where some of the discussions that we have here with other partners and how you're dealing with the same issues across the region will help us as well, perhaps, in how we move forward. I think the other challenge here is that without incentives, obviously, it's very difficult to make some of the changes that we're looking to inspire equitable across all communities. Not everyone's going to have access to the capital to be able to put solar on or to purchase an electric vehicle, despite the tax savings and credits that are available today. And of course, there are discussions about whether those even stay in the long run. So as we're developing this roadmap, it's going to be interesting trying to dovetail that with what we're seeing on the horizon, both at the state and federal levels. I think of how the roadmap, as you've discussed, is really an effort to try to bring together also what you're seeing amongst all the various climate action plans that have been developed within the region as well. And my guess is that they're all slightly different depending on their geographical location and what types of actions they can take when it comes to GHG reduction. The City of San Diego, of course, has a very ambitious plan when it comes to our goals and objectives. And I think the challenge that we have faced is trying to turn that into an actual plan for how that gets implemented. The goals and objectives have always been great, but I think without an actual framework for how that might be implemented and understanding of the fiscal implications, and then ultimately the benchmarks that help us determine whether we're actually successful in taking the steps towards it, all of that is necessary in order for us to develop priorities. And right now, I think we're in an era where I'm guessing many municipalities are facing the same challenges in terms of resources and capacity to do this work. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have the vision still, but I think because of that lack of resource, even more so, we need to understand where the greatest priorities are and the best opportunities are for us to take action that would actually move us forward. Otherwise, we're going to see 2035 come and go without a significant amount of change. And to Mayor Eller's point, I think this is where sometimes I'm just sort of a little bit practical and realistic. I know the state has provided some objectives in terms of electrification. The City of San Diego certainly has as well. I'm one to acknowledge that without extremely bold action, we're not on track today to hit those goals. It's why the infrastructure we're putting in will still matter for the next 50 years because we all can acknowledge that there are still going to be vehicles on the road in the next 50 years, and many of them still probably running on gas. And it's going to take time, it's going to take resources, it's going to take the actual roadmap to incentivize the changes that we're trying to develop, which is the objective, but we do need to continue to plan for the reality that we still live in as well. So that might be just the feedback that I've got at the moment, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions on it moving forward. Thank you.
Did I have any other comments from the
Through the chair,
There we go.
Dita Siamani, City of National City, representing San Diego County Water Authority. Just to piggyback on Mayor Jones' comment and, Mayor Eller's building efficiency as part of GHG reduction. I think programs that support our disadvantaged communities to enhance their properties. Maybe we can include that in this program, just like what Mayor Jones said, that there are members in our community to improve or enhance their properties in order for that help in this program. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any others? Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. I wanted to add a couple of comments. I reviewed all of the documents which were sent concerning your plan, and a few things come to mind. Number one is I don't think there was sufficient attention paid to wildfire prevention as climate policy. And specifically in my subregion, we're dealing with the fact that the single biggest threat, wildfire threat, is posed by the condition of our public lands. And so when your plan emphasizes conservation of those lands, inherently that leads to a bias against controlled burns, fuel reduction, and fire breaks, which are the only things that have any possibility of protecting my community, which burned to the ground in 2003 from another wildfire. And yet I have seen consistently in the policies as reflected in, for example, resource management plans for public lands in our area, that whenever this subject comes up, the bias is always in favor of not doing the fuel reduction, the fire breaks, and the controlled burns. We've seen in California the use of CEQA repeatedly used in order to fuel lawsuits to prevent fuel reductions. And we've seen recently with the Palisades fire what the result of that can be. And I don't see any reference in your proposal for CEQA reform, which is necessary in order to reduce wildfire threat and therefore reduce the possibility of whatever carbon is being stored in those plants from going up in smoke. So that's point number one. Secondly, we talk about decarbonizing the power grid when a two reactor nuclear power plant would provide to be able to replace all of the gas-fired plants in San Diego County, reducing emissions to 0. I didn't hear any mention of that in your proposal whatsoever. Numerous countries around the globe are moving further in the direction of nuclear power because it is the only economically viable source of power that is truly zero emissions. So I didn't see any reference to that there. With respect to electrification, I would urge you to take a look at the recent collapse of Germany's government, which was prompted in part by the public backlash to a heat pump mandate, which does not work very well in many particular climate situations, and is expensive and unreliable and so on. And the public backlash to that literally caused the collapse of the German government in an earlier election. Speaking of bad examples coming from Europe, we cannot have a world-class economy or any type of manufacturing whatsoever with expensive energy. Every time the cost of energy goes up because of any of these policies that are articulated, it creates a financial incentive to move manufacturing elsewhere to places like China and India, which do not give a rip about greenhouse gas emissions. And the consequence of that is the net amount of greenhouse gas emissions goes up. We're sharing the same atmosphere as China and India, which have continued to build coal-fired nuclear power plants. And so I do not see any reference in your plan to initiatives to reduce the cost of energy to consumers and therefore reduce the cost of energy in the commercial sector as well, which further incentivize the offshoring, for example, to Mexico or to Canada or to elsewhere. With respect to telecommuting, I think that's a fine idea, but for the fact that there are many people who live in rural San Diego County who can't telecommute. You're an electrician, you're a plumber, the person who works at the cafeteria, they don't have the option of telecommuting. And so policies which incentivize telecommuting, which by definition involves the taxation of people and giving some of their tax money back through an incentive, winds up disproportionately hurting those people who don't have the option to telecommute. And therefore, that is inherently unfair. And I don't see how, when we're talking so much about equity, how is that equitable for those blue-collar workers who rely upon their vehicle, who are being told that they need to get rid of their gas-powered vehicle and replace it with a much more expensive electric vehicle that has a vertical depreciation curve, and that somehow that policy is somehow supposed to be fair to them? I think the benefits of the policies that are proposed are highly speculative. I would note that California's high-speed rail boondoggle, which is up to about $100 billion, was originally justified by Governor Brown as a greenhouse gas reduction measure. But yet, how many tons of greenhouse gases have been emitted in the construction of that? And it's still and if anyone thinks that that project is going to change the climate of planet Earth, is ludicrous. And so every dollar that is spent in pursuit of one of these policies is a dollar that cannot be spent, is not available for other purposes that could provide greater public benefit. And so there were numerous options here, which I didn't hear anywhere in your proposal whatsoever. And then finally, I would just state with respect to any policy proposal that winds up increasing the cost of energy, increases the amount of energy poverty in our state and in our community. And so over and over and over again, we see the high density areas near the coast voting for policies which result in higher energy costs, which are disproportionately borne by the people who are further from the coast, who have to run their air conditioner more often in the summer and run their heat more often in the winter. With respect to electrification, you're going to tell people in East San Diego County who live further away, who have to run their heaters more often, that they have to get rid of their propane burner and put in a heat pump, which will increase the total amount of energy consumption, all in the pursuit of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which could have been more effectively reduced with a single 2-reactor nuclear power plant. So I think that this plan has a long way to go, particularly with respect to discriminating against people who live in rural communities and blue-collar people who do not have the opportunity to telecommute to work. So I hope that you might take some of those ideas under advisement, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Any other comments from the board before I start? No, you don't get round two.
I don't?
No.
Okay. I'd like to make a comment about his, but I can do it later. That's
Okay. First off, thank you very much to the climate team. This was an awful lot of work and I greatly appreciate it. I also appreciate all the very heartfelt comments and frustration I am sensing from the board members. However, at SANDAG, we do not have the authority to change the law about nuclear energy here in the state of California. So I actually do not want you to waste your time saying that's an option we have. What I'd like you to do is talk about what we have the law to allow us to do, and that will help us meet the law that we're required to meet. You can make a note about nuclear power if you want to. Let's go back to all the other comments that are put out there. Again, I feel your frustration, but we have to remember, what are we here for? What can we legally do? What we can legally come up with? Because we have a mandate to meet. We have to show we've got a plan that'll do something. So let's talk about that. I like most of the suggestions you have in there. I do want to get more public comment on everything, but I also want to talk about, just as a very quick note, roundabouts. I spent a lot of years in Coronado trying to get people to agree to a roundabout. We finally have it there. It's working beautifully. It was a lot of education of the community, people that didn't want it. Now I'll fess up. I lived for a while in Newport, Rhode Island when I was going to school, and there's roundabouts everywhere in New England. I mean, they're everywhere, whether you call them a turnabout or whatever you want to call them. And when they're there, people just get used to it and it does make things easier. So I appreciate where it's put in there. I do recognize that, to be honest, the best thing we could do, nobody can afford to do it. If we could go into everybody's old home and redo their windows and add insulation, that'd be great. We don't have the funding for that. So suggest that's the way to solve the problem. You can put it there. We all adopted, most communities around this table, PACE programs for that very goal. Not many people took them up because it requires them paying them back. They weren't grants. They just allowed homeowners to get a loan in advance and they paid over time on their property taxes. So to suggest that's a solution, it's not realistically a solution. However, we can definitely put about more education about the PACE opportunities are there and other ways that people could upgrade their homes. And I'm not disagreeing with you. Years ago, before we put in solar, I had a solar company come to me and they didn't realize, oh, in my private life, I'm an energy attorney. So it's not my first rodeo. And so they came to give me an appraisal of what it would cost. And I talked them through it, and they admitted that I would have personally, in my Coronado home, so I am on the coast, would have gotten more bang for the buck if I just replaced the windows, because the house is a very old house. We ultimately didn't do that because we put in a full solar, 2 batteries, and moved to heat pumps. So we could talk about heat pumps. They actually do work wonderfully. The question is only if you put solar in. That way you are not running with fossil fuels. So you're correct. If you tell people in East County, put them in and they don't have any solar, it will not work for them. I agree 100%. So when we do discuss some of the things in the plan, let's make sure we put the correct caveats in, because I don't want to mislead anybody. Let's see if I'm addressing all of the ones. There was an awful lot of them that I think need a little clarification. In terms of what we're doing, because everybody's going to be in electric vehicles in 2035, not hardly. The state law suggests that we're not going to be selling more cars that aren't electric vehicles. There will be non-electric vehicles in this state, I can guarantee you, for at least the next 50 years. They'll just find ways to keep them, upgrading them. So we still should be planning things that will accommodate gas-powered as well as electric vehicles. And by the way, an electric vehicle can use a roundabout just as easily. I have 2 electric vehicles. And roundabouts are easier to use than all the stop signs in my town everywhere. That's the complaint I get from everybody. Why do we have stop signs virtually on every street? Because that creates more greenhouse gases. I would like to talk about, though, one of the things that, and I appreciate all the options that were discussed, but finding ways to help jointly doing charging stations for businesses. That is one of the issues. There is not a lot of grant funding for mutual use of charging stations. Right now, if you're a big enough business and you have a large enough motor pool that you are obligated under the federal Clean Energy, Clean Air Act, that you have to turn over part of your fleets into electric. And a bunch of them did it for natural gas a while back because that was the law. Now they have to get the rest of them under battery. But there isn't as much discussion about how to possibly have charging stations that are shared. I'm on the MTS board, as some of you are. MTS is going through all that, how they're going to change over. And part of the problem is having to create those facilities that have places big enough charging stations. So I would like us to look at that, maybe some joint, maybe some owned by the government, maybe something that you can just come in and pay for as a large business. Coronado actually bit the bullet, and we're one of the first cities in San Diego County that will have an all-electric fire engine. We just approved it last year. We wound up because somebody else fell out of the queue. We'll be able to have one within the next 18 months. You're all welcome to go down and use it and see it, ride it, our folks. It really is as good as you think it is, but it is not cheap. And so that is one of the things I understand completely. So we might want to look at ways that we can help. And in today's world, everything that's gone on the last 6 weeks, I'm not sure what federal grants are going to be available, but possibly find ways for the cities themselves, how they're going to address their needs. All right, I think we've given you way more input than you're going to know what to do with, but thank you again. Greatly appreciate it. And I'm sorry, Mayor Jones, is there anything else you really thought you should add on the record?
Yes.
All right, I'll give you one more shot.
And honestly, you actually said something too that kind of spurred something as well. So electric fire engines are great. However, very hilly, big cities, 25 square miles, the technology isn't there yet. So I as soon as it actually would work in our city, I am 100% with you on that. One thing that I would like to say is we don't have any county representation here today. And I think, our Mr. Nearing had mentioned that he was here on behalf of the planning groups. It's a tragedy that, again, we don't have any county representation, and they do have very different needs in the cities. I grew up in Ramona and El Cajon, so in Ramona, living in Ramona, I totally understand some of the things that they are talking about. So I just wanted to mention that because I do believe that they should have be a voting member on this body due to the fact that there is over 500,000, I think maybe even closer to 600,000 people with zero representation, and they have real needs that do need to be recognized. So anyway, thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate it.
Did you want one more comment? All right, this is only because this is an important item. I'm not making this a future option. Go ahead.
Chair, for the record, I'm just going to note that if anyone wants to check out the first all-electric fire station in the region, you're welcome to come visit the city of San Diego and Station 52, as we just opened the station with that a couple months ago.
That is awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, I gave them a chance, so I will give anybody else. If you need to have a second, I am fair.
Well, I think my only question would be procedural in nature. I almost said a point of order. So is that the standard policy in here, is that we get one bite at the apple and that's it?
For this
Because
panel,
that is unusual for any of the panels I've been on SANDAG or any other panel I've been in the last 30 years. But I need to know now if that is the standing policy of this chair.
I will let the attorney address.
Hello, everyone. Samantha Folk. I'm with the Office of General Counsel here at SANDAG. Traditionally at our meetings, the chair has discretion to run the meeting as she sees fit.
Oh, I understand. And I'm just asking the question. So next time I know when I have all my comments prepared, I will go and when I have the floor, I'll run with it unless you also put a time limit on it too.
Well, to be honest, that was, you must have overheard me because I said we have to do one or the other because some of the comments went a little longer than I probably would have been comfortable with, but we're okay. We don't have a huge agenda, but it's already looking at the time. I'm not sure how long people want to dedicate. I don't want to lose quorum because you all came to say the one thing you wanted and then you take off on me.
Having chaired many a meeting, I fully understand and empathize with where you're going. But by the same token, I've been cut off by previous chairs in not this chair, of course, but previous chairs where I was cut off, but nobody else was. I just want to make sure we follow Robert's rules and we're fair to everyone.
I couldn't agree with you more, which is why I went around the room. I will not ever be unfair.
I appreciate that. And I have no further comments on the issues at hand, though.
Okay. Is everybody feeling heard? All right. Thank you very much. It was a very productive presentation and input. Thank you all. Okay. On to the next item. Item 5, Courtney Becker will present an overview of SANDAG's Regional Shoreline Management Program, its accomplishments, and next steps.
And Chair Downey, I'll just kick off the item. Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Keith Greer. I'm the Deputy Director here in charge of our environmental and climate programs. And so today we're going to talk to an informational item on the SANDAG's Regional Shoreline Management Program. It's probably not a program you think a lot about, but there is an active group here at SANDAG Shoreline Preservation Working Group that reports to the Regional Planning Committee on all things related to shoreline management and monitoring. It's one of our oldest working groups. It dates back all the way to the 1980s. And it was established because of some of the tremendous impacts that some of our coastal storms and El Nino winters have. Rips the sand off the beach, creates a lot of economic impact for the region. So we established a shoreline reservation working group to look at it, just like we do everything else that's regional in nature, like traffic. So our beaches don't stop and start with one jurisdiction, they go all down the coast. So today, Courtney's going to talk about the Regional Shoreline Management Program. She's going to talk about why it was created, the status of what has been accomplished, and what we're currently working on. So with that, turn it over to Courtney.
Thank you, Keith. It's wonderful to be with you all today. I will move on. Let's get this started. So as Keith mentioned, the Shoreline Preservation Working Group was established back in the 1980s. And as a fun fact, that is our longest standing working group here at SANDAG. The working group consists of all the coastal jurisdictions with an elected official from each, including Mayor Ehlers here today, as well as representatives from the Navy and Port of San Diego. Essentially, anyone who has an interest in making sure that our beaches are not eroding. We added to that group about 6 years ago the port cities, being the cities of Chula Vista and National City, as their concerns are more focused on how sea level rise impacts their port areas. We are also supported by technical and advisory members, including State Parks, Coastal Commission, Department of Fish and Wildlife Service, Surfrider Foundation, and a slew of others who all have a common interest in making sure that our beaches are maintained for our residents and future visitors alike. So as Keith mentioned, there were particular events that happened dating back in 1983. That was when San Diego experienced the strongest El Nino storm event ever recorded to date. Because of that storm, there were 17 related deaths, 33 oceanfront properties that were completely destroyed, 3,000 homes and 900 businesses that were also damaged. And these photos just show a small glimpse of what that damage looked like. In total, there was an estimated $300 million in economic damage and another $106 million in public recreation facilities damaged. This event foreshadowed what the region could be experiencing as climate continues to warm and severe storm events become more frequent. And because of that event in 1983, many property owners sought to protect their land with seawalls. But the problem with seawalls is once one is installed, if the other side isn't protected, then that can become more damage quicker. So it led to more seawalls to be installed until the entire coastline was armored in some areas. Another component to seawalls is the fact that they disrupt the natural flow of sediment to the beach, thus starving the beach and causing it to become more narrow. So recognizing the need for coastal property protection and the desirability of the beach, SANDAG developed a series of regional coastal policy documents. Some of those documents over the years include, starting with in July of 1993, the Shoreline Preservation Strategy. This established that the San Diego's beaches are an important economic, recreational, and visual asset to the region that must be maintained. It established a vision that all beaches should be at least 250 feet wide to protect against strong storm events. And by accomplishing that, it proposed to do an initial nourishment of 30 million cubic yards of sand with an annual maintenance of 450,000 cubic yards of sand to keep that beach wide. And to date, I can say that we have not even done a third of that. It was then followed by the Regional Beach Strategy Retention Strategy in 2001, which outlines policies for proposing hardened structures like groins and jetties, as well as other sand retention devices like artificial reefs to be installed and recommended areas for potential pilot projects. Then in 2006, there's the Sand Compatibility Opportunistic Use Program Plan, otherwise known as SCOOP. This simplifies the process for cities to be able to use sand opportunistically onto the beach. So for example, if there's a construction project where sand that needs to be disposed of is compatible with beach sand, then that sand can be placed on the beach opportunistically without an exhaustive approval process. Lastly, in 2009, it was the Coastal Regional Sediment Management Plan, which outlines and examines how sand moves within the region, as well as how to best manage that as a resource. And so that's kind of the history of the program. I'm going to be moving on to our current projects and as well as recommendations to the program. And let's start with our most extensive program under regional shoreline management. In order to make important coastal management decisions, we really need to understand what's the state of our region's beaches. In order to answer that question, the Regional Shoreline Monitoring Program was established in 1996. This program is paid by the local coastal jurisdictions to perform biannual shoreline monitoring surveys to measure beach width change and shore zone volume change over time. The data is then compiled into an annual report that is then presented to the Shoreline Preservation Working Group annually. Our stakeholders are then able to use this information to make important coastal management decisions, like identifying hotspots or areas with higher erosion rates, to help prepare and protect against future sea level rise, as well as improve resiliency to our important coastal infrastructure. Based on the results of this program, implementation projects have been performed, including our regional beach sand projects. The first regional beach sand project was performed in 2001. It placed about 2.2 million cubic yards of sand on 12 beaches and 7 coastal cities here in San Diego. And in total, it cost $18 million. Fast forward 12 years, Regional Beach Sand Project 2 was completed. This project was smaller in scale as it only placed 1.4 million cubic yards of sand on, let me get this right, 8 beaches and 5 coastal cities. But because of inflation, it did cost more. It was about $26 million. Now, we consider these as one-off projects because they were not performed in any regular maintenance cycle, but rather when funding became available. Based on the information that we have gathered from our regional shoreline monitoring program, the data shows that these types of nature-based climate solution projects are most effective when performed on a 5 to 10 year maintenance cycle. And because of that, the Shoreline Preservation Working Group directed SANDAG to initiate another regional beach sand project, being Regional Beach Sand Project 3. Regarding this project, we developed 3 phases that mirrors Regional Beach Sand Project 2. Starting with phase 1, that is to perform the preliminary planning activities. This is to tell us what's the most feasible and viable option for performing this regional project. In total, this phase has cost $200,000 and it was paid for by our local coastal jurisdictions. Right now, the draft feasibility study and economic analysis report will be sent to our working group members in the next few weeks for review and comments, and the final report will be completed this summer. Moving on to phase 2, that is to perform the obtaining environmental clearances and permits, as well as engineering design. This phase is estimated to cost about $6 million. Earlier this year, SANDAG became aware of the Division of Boating and Waterways Public Beach Restoration Grant opportunity. We were able to apply to this grant and are hopeful to hear back on if we were successful in the summer of '26. If we are awarded, there will be a 15% match component for the coastal participating cities, but all of that will be discussed in greater detail with our Shoreline Preservation Working Group members at our next meeting. The last phase is to perform the construction and monitoring. And as of right now, the cost of this phase is still yet to be determined. However, SANDAG has begun conversations with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to incorporate Phase 3 of Regional Beach Sand Project 3 into their already existing Encinitas and Solana Beach Coastal Storm Reduction Project. Last year, the cities of San Clemente, Encinitas, and Solana Beach all received sand by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, they will also be continuing to receive sand on another 7 to 10-year interval cycle for the next 50 years. That's huge. If we can partner with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to incorporate Phase 3 of Regional Beach Sand Project 3 into their already existing project while the dredge is out here on the West Coast, we would be able to opportunistically nourish the entire region in an efficient and effective manner, thus reducing costs, as the most costly part of Phase 3 is mobilization of the dredge. SANDAG is working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to get appropriations for them to start this work. Now, moving on to our recommendations to the program. Over the past year, SANDAG has met with our working group members as well as experts from around the region, forming a sediment management technical task force. These experts include representatives from Scripps Institute of Oceanography, representatives from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, our region's coastal managers, as well as our partners to the north in Orange County, as they experience many of the same coastal management issues as we do here in San Diego. After meeting with these experts, several recommendations have been made to the program, and I wanted to highlight a few key ones here today. Starting with the first one, it's to update and combine SANDAG shoreline policy documents into one plan. As I mentioned earlier, we have 4 segmented, fairly outdated documents. By updating and creating one shoreline policy plan, we can incorporate current science and identify any data gaps. We can then also incorporate all of the studies that we're gathering for another regional beach sand project into this plan and update the nourishment amounts, as we have not nourished 30 million cubic yards of sand in the past since 1993. We can also include approaching this as a nourishment and a programmatic cycle versus not one-off projects. It was also recommended that we form a science and engineering task force to help us guide in this plan development, and also include our Southern California peer agencies to help guide this. The next recommendation is to continue the regional shoreline monitoring program to collect data. As of right now, we have 30 years worth of data that is compiled into a stagnant paper report that is then presented to our working group on a PowerPoint. It was envisioned to have a potential open data portal so we can more holistically visualize how beaches have changed over time. Lastly, it is recommended to obtain one regional scoop permit for all of the coastal cities. As of right now, each individual coastal city must obtain their own scoop permit, which can be an exhaustive and timely process. By obtaining a regional scoop permit, we can take the heavy lift off of any one particular city and be able to create more opportunities when appropriate for cities to use sand opportunistically. These recommendations will be taken to our working group and to discuss how we can incorporate into our future projects. And with that, that concludes my presentation. My contact information is on the screen above, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Francesca, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have 2 public comments. Cesar Javier will be followed by Truth.
A big reader of history. History repeats itself. Could you imagine how our Allied forces landed in Normandy in World War II? Shoreline defense by the enemy. We were the Allied forces that landed to help our besieged allies. That's a lesson to learn from. We also have lesson about the tsunami in Phuket, if I pronounce it well, in Thailand. And also the Japanese earthquake that occurred in the shoreline of Japan that causes or caused leak from nuclear plants. I will ask my counselor from City of San Diego, what happened to this shoreline management on the boundary of District 8 and Tijuana. I would like to help my city by waking up my representative, our representative. Who is the lead agency on land pollution? Who is the lead agency of coast pollution? Who is the lead agency of water, including the one that is on the delta, we call it, the exit of cleaner water? And who is the lead agency of air pollution? Where are they? Where is IPA here? This has something to do with this item. Bright minds, bright vision that we should all partake, if only to treat it, series of treatment plan and come out a pure idea and doable right now. We are on crisis. We need not to waste time. Let's solve first what is doable now with our resources. The city has money.
Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Truth.
Maybe it's an emergency, not a crisis. I liken the issue of sand to the Otay Mesa East toll. It doesn't matter unless you're directly affected. You know what I mean, Ron? Encinitas, San Diego, Coronado, hopefully you're not going to talk too much. Maybe the sand in the coast is supposed to erode. A lot of the rest of the country actually believes that California is supposed to sink into the sea. If sounding is all about data science or data-driven deception, why does page 50 say wider beaches may have helped reduce storm impacts of 2015, 2016? Is that something a publicly funded agency should be sure of before just throwing into a presentation? There's only one pilot sand retention project, so people have to claw each other. So fun. Is there an equity preference or a climate justice preference? Because Oceanside already has their own project, so I'm happy to nominate Imperial Beach. How can SANDAG talk about impacts to tourism when we have areas of the county being deprived of tourism? Sounds like the so-called policymakers are out of touch with reality as usual. If it's true that there's $2.4 billion per year in beach spending, how much is Imperial Beach seeing, do you think, with the businesses that have been suffering from a lack of tourism? So for those that never get out of their 15-minute city bubble, in Coronado, there are tourists who speak every language. In Imperial Beach, you mostly just hear local families. And it's not because of Coronado's fancy buildings or its proximity to this toxic place across the bridge. It's because of the sweeping under the rug of the biggest environmental injustice that currently exists in our country, including by SANDAG. And I definitely have a remedy for that in the future. So where is this new sand coming from exactly? If the Southern California Sand Collaborative collaborates on sand issues from whatever point conception is to the US-Mexican border, have they studied the health of the sand? Because I can guarantee that not all sand is equal in this county. So I'd like to see a new sand health strategy. Is it possible that IB could do a sand exchange with other cities as equitable environmental mitigation? I got a lot of frustrations that coastal people should understand. They should, but sometimes they whine about tourism, how lucky they are.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Before I open it up to board comments, I'd like to ask a question, if I could, to the presenters. I was going to ask this question earlier. As somebody that voted many times on Shoreline to support the previous sand dumps, never on Coronado, for other communities that needed it more, you'd mentioned this one is going to be taking the whole coast along in San Diego County. Can you clarify then how which cities will be in this, and when would a certain city be able to get their share? Can you help us figure that out?
I'll address that. So there are 8 coastal jurisdictions in San Diego. All of them are participating in the Regional Beach Sand 3 project. For phase 1, which is the planning and feasibility study, they played 100% of that phase feasibility study itself. They will decide in the future if they want to pay for sand on their beach. The sand will be on a per volume basis. You want more sand, you pay for more sand on your beach itself. So that's the future as we get.
Thank you very much. With that, do I have any board members that would like to comment on this? Yes. Are you saying yes? Okay.
So more questions on the paying for it. I know in the current sand replenishment that Encinitas is participating in, it's a big portion paid by the feds, another significant portion paid by the state, leaving a copay or whatever you want to call it. In this sand program 3, whatever you want to call it. What is it the same kind of percentage, or are you anticipating a 50-50 split?
So I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor. So right now, Encinitas and Solana Beach are very fortunate. They've been working the last 20 years with the Army Corps of Engineers. And right now, the Army Corps is coming on a cycle. So it's not a one-off project, it's on a cycle basis, where they're going to come and put sand on the city of Encinitas and Solana Beach, and then they leave. They don't hit any other beaches in San Diego County.
Right.
Now, there's a cost there, right? There's a matching cost, 60% from the Army Corps pays for, from the federal government, 40% from the locals. What we are trying to do with this Regional Beach Sand 3 project is to engage the Corps to have them do the rest of the beaches since they're down here.
Yeah.
As Courtney mentioned, one of the biggest costs is getting these dredges. They're big dredges. They have to come from the East Coast. It's like an $8 to $10 million cost just to get them here off the coast. So that's the intent here, is to work with the Army Corps, and then the cost will be shared the same as it is with Encinitas, Solana Beach, whoever else uses it. It's that federal fair share match out there.
And has there been any thought put to the potential of having one stationed out here? In other words, as an asset for, and maybe it's not just San Diego, maybe it's Southern California, who knows?
That's a great question. So in the feasibility study, we have specifically addressed the idea of buying a barge or dredge in this case and keeping it in the West Coast or keeping it in Southern California. And what's the potential cost benefit there?
Yeah.
So is it being addressed, and jurisdictions will have that in a couple of weeks from now.
Okay, next question is on Scoop. Would the regional, having a SANDAG based one, would that expedite the ability to get a Scoop permit, basically? We'd be falling under a umbrella, so to speak, and.
So it makes no sense how the Scoop program works. So the
Sorry.
Scoop program is when you have sand opportunistically, you can place it on your beach. That's a good thing for everybody. You don't have to go through the layers and layers of 5 different permit agencies to do that.
Yeah.
But the way San Diego was set up is each jurisdiction has their own Scoop permit. So when they expire, then you have to re-up it, jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Perfect.
We're looking to do that regionally. Now, Orange County is ahead of us. They're already looking at that right now. All we're saying, let's just model that. Let's keep one permit for the region, and then it's easier for everybody.
And so easier for everybody in the renewal, but as far as getting, like, we have projects going right now, and we're looking at trying to, for the replenishment program doesn't go north of Beacons. And so we have a whole section that's not covered. And we're looking at using Scoop to do that. So would this regional make it faster? You know, I understand the renewal will be easier, but am I looking at the same hoops? Although now I have to work it through SANDAG.
So now you don't have to work with your SANDAG. There's a certain requirements you meet. You have to meet X, Y, or Z requirements. Then you can put your sand on the beach. I don't see those changing. The requirements are not ours, they're the federal and state requirements. But this way, you're not going to have to re-up that Scoop every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and would that preclude the local entities from pursuing their own Scoop permit too in parallel? Okay,
If they
cool.
want to.
And the one thing I didn't see in here, we talk about economic benefit. I think we should also talk about public safety. You know, Encinitas has had some unfortunate incidents where one family lost 3 members in one bluff failure. And then we've had previous ones even within the last couple of decades. And I think the same's true up and down the coast. So sand replenishment, in addition to being a region-wide tourist and local recreational need, it's also a safety need, because we see the lack of sand, lack of beach causing more bluff failure and potentially loss of life. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to make comments on this item? I will let you do it, but I just want everybody to know we lost quorum. So your comments are welcome, but I would also encourage people to email any further comments. I want to hear yours here, but I'm just letting anybody know. And Mayor Jones, when she gets wherever she's going, she can email comments. Please.
Yeah, just a quick comment. And so I have a little sensitivity to this because I grew up on Long Island, where all you have to do is, anyone who doesn't think that this is urgent needs to go visit some of the places that were impacted by any one of these storms, and holes are punched in barrier islands and so on. I'm just curious, this is a really broad-based question, but is there a bias institutionally within federal government, state government, et cetera, in favor of emergency repairs and mitigation following a large storm or some erosion over longer term infrastructure improvements, which would slow the rate of of sand, losing sand and erosion and so on. Is this a matter where there's funding when there's an emergency, but there's no funding to prevent the impact of or to mitigate against that emergency when it comes?
Take a crack at that and Courtney answer afterwards. So you call the hurricanes that come and hit the East Coast all the time. You mentioned Long Island. When Hurricane Sandy came in, all of a sudden stripped the beaches from New Jersey, from sand out there. There was major infrastructure impacts, but immediately there was money available. It seems, and I'll say this bluntly, that Southern California doesn't get its fair share of federal funding for this issue. And everybody agrees to that, everybody in the professional industry. And then we ask them why, and you say, well, you're on the wrong coast. You're not close enough to the federal government. So I don't know how to describe it beyond that. Maybe Courtney can help it be more elegant than that, but it does seem to be a bias.
Yeah, I would just echo what Keith was saying, that, the proximity to the federal government, and also we have storms out here, but they're not as severe hurricanes as like the East Coast. I'm from Connecticut. I've experienced a lot of these growing up, a lot of East Coast people here. It's much more real when you're experiencing the hurricane versus out here. We'll have strong storm events, and there is definitely public safety hazards, as what was explained by Mayor Ellers, but it's not quite as like a giant storm in the eye of the storm coming through, that it doesn't draw that much attention to it. So I think by collaborating and bringing all of Southern California together, we can kind of band together to kind of elevate this issue higher up with the federal government.
Any other comments? I will add one more. As somebody that lived on the East Coast for a while, I agree 100%. I can name the storms because it was big news when it happened when I was there. Nobody can name when it happens here because it's kind of like drip, 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 dripping. So I would encourage the study. I'm anxious to see the cost of getting a dredge. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons, if you noticed in the years, the first scoop and even the second scoop were delayed a while because the first time the dredge was over in Australia somewhere and we couldn't get it here. It just took too long to try and get it to finish whatever emergency thing it was doing somewhere else to get to the West Coast. So I think if we go back and look at our history, that can help us justify why it might be worth paying to have one here. The only other thing I would ask, even though the federal government is working with the Army Corps of Engineers right now, we had an opportunity when the Navy decided to dredge yet again around Coronado to put in possibly the fourth carrier when they want to. We had possible sand and we were not able to take it. And there was a whole bunch of weird reasons. So can you please help as we're doing this to make sure it would apply to even the federal government if it wanted to deposit some on at the time we had issues with certifying it was the clean sand or whatever it is we have to have. But I just want to make sure in the studies we look at that because that's one of the easiest ways to get sand because they go dredging wherever they're dredging. Thank you very much. It was a very informative and helpful discussion. And to save time, I was going to have a discussion on item 6, which is items you might want to have in next agendas. Please just email them to me if there's anything you can think of that you think this committee would be worthy. We would be most interested in hearing it. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Oh, did I forget something? Okay.